So the Nun 2 has come out, and even though she's scary, there are people scarier than her. Hello everyone and welcome back to our channel. I'm your host Emily, and today we'll be counting down our list of the top 10 real evil people scarier than the Nun. So if you're sitting in the dark, I suggest turning on a light. Coming in at number 10 is Kim Jung-un. Little is known about North Korea due to their dictator Kim Jong-un's rule, but what we do know is absolutely terrifying. Kim is very strict with his people as they can't access the internet, and if they do, it can only be government-approved sites. Same goes with film. The citizens are also treated horribly there. There's hardly any food and everyone is weak and hungry, and it's even been said that the streets are lined with dead bodies. They also have very strict laws that result in people being executed or sent to prison camps, which are one of the worst forms of torment. A former guard likened the prisoners to walking skeletons, dwarfs, and cripples in rags, and he estimated that about 30% of the prisoners had deformities such as torn off ears, smashed eyes, crooked noses, and faces covered with cuts and scars resulting from beatings and other mistreatment, and that those people were still forced to work. They had to do hard physical labor in agriculture, mining, and inside factories from 5 a.m. to 8 p.m., followed by ideological re-education and self-criticism sessions. Now, prisoners there are forced to sleep in a room with 80 to 90 people in 30 square meter flea-infested rooms, and are only occasionally allowed to use the toilet, which there is one for about every 300 people, and may only take a shower after several months. No one should have to live like that, it's horrible, and this is just the stuff we do know. Kim is so secretive, I fear we don't know the true horrors of what goes on in North Korea. Number 9. Pedro Lopez. Known as the Monster of the Andes, Pedro Lopez is currently the second most prolific serial slayer in recorded history. Between 1969 and 1980, he claimed the lives of at least 110 girls throughout northern South America. However, he personally claims to have ended the lives of over 300 at a rate of 3 victims per week. He was finally arrested in 1980 and remained imprisoned until 1994. Then soon after his confession, he directed the authorities to the bodies of 53 victims, and his confession soon led to the confirmation of a total of 110 bodies in Ecuador. Later in 1980, Pedro was convicted of homicide and sentenced to 16 years in prison, the maximum prison sentence available in Ecuador at the time. However, Pedro was quickly re-arrested and sent to a mental institution in his native Colombia. He remained there for 4 years and was released in 1998 as he was declared sane and released on a $70 bail on the condition that he would periodically report to the authorities, but he almost immediately ran away. The last reported sighting of Pedro was in September 1999 when he visited the National Civil Registry to renew his citizenship card. In 2002, Colombian National Police and Interpol issued warrants for his arrest over a death bearing similarities to his MO. The Interpol warrant was deactivated in 2005, but he still remains a fugitive. Neither his location nor his status are known of today. Number 8. Vlad the Impaler. Born in 1431, Vlad Tepes the Impaler earned his nickname from his favorite method of execution for enemies of the state and witches. He was the ruler of Wallachia, and according to legend, he would impale his victims on a sharp stake or nail them headfirst onto a large wooden pole, and then watch as they died slowly from blood loss. His other favorite methods were boiling them alive in oil or water or both, burning them alive with sulfur, and roasting them over an open fire. He also enjoyed hanging criminals upside down from poles and then cutting off their heads with a saber while they were still alive, just so they could see what was happening before they died. Yeah, I wouldn't want to get on his bad side. Number 7. Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan was the founder and first Khagan of the Mongol Empire, which later became the largest adjoining land empire in history. Having spent the majority of his life uniting Mongol tribes, he launched a series of military campaigns which conquered large parts of China and Central Asia. In the 13th century, he ended the lives of so many peasants that the carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere were significantly reduced as a result. During his 21-year reign, his destructive armies were responsible for the deaths up to 40 million people. Now, with so many people gone and nobody left to farm the lands owned by peasants, nature went back to its true form and grew back into carbon-absorbing forests. Now, it's estimated that 700 million tons of carbon were wiped from the atmosphere, which, to put in perspective, is around the same amount of carbon dioxide generated in a year through global gasoline consumption. While that was good for the environment, it wasn't good for the people who lost their lives. He then died in August of 1227, but his death was kept a closely guarded guarded secret. According to legend, Genghis Khan's last words were to a few faithful followers, which were, "I have conquered for you a large empire, but my life was too short to take the whole world. That I leave you." Now that is also absolutely terrifying to hear. Number 6. Ivan the Terrible. I mean, with a name like that, you gotta know he's a bad guy. Renowned for his temper and paranoia, Russian ruler Ivan IV Vasilievich inspired incredible fear. As a teenager, he liked mistreating animals, throwing cats and dogs from the Kremlin ramparts. He served as the first Tsar of Russia, reigning from 1533 to 1584. He established a personal guard who helped him terrorize and oppress his subjects through torment and execution. After defections and the death of his wife in the 1560s, he became even more violent, ordering the massacre of Novgorod in 1570 with casualties in the thousands. He also beat his own pregnant daughter-in-law, after which she miscarried. When his son asked him about this, he was filled with rage at this apparent uproar of disloyalty from his son and struck him with a staff he often carried to punish servants. The strike cracked his son's skull, and the blow ultimately ended his life, leaving Ivan's other son as the new heir. Number 5. Shiro Ishii. Unit 731 was a covert biological and chemical warfare research and development unit of the Imperial Japanese Army that undertook lethal human experimentation during the Second Sino-Japanese War and World War II. It was responsible for some of the most notorious war crimes carried out by Japanese personnel. Some of the numerous atrocities committed by the commander Shiro Ishii and others under his command in Unit 731 include vivisection of living people, including pregnant women who were impregnated by the doctors. Prisoners had limbs amputated and reattached to other parts of their body. Some prisoners had part of their bodies frozen and thawed to study the resulting untreated gangrene. Humans were also used as living test cases for grenades and flamethrowers, and prisoners were injected with strains of diseases disguised as vaccinations to study their effects. Now, having been granted immunity by the American occupation authorities at the end of the war, Ishii never spent any time in jail for his crimes and died at the age of 67 of throat cancer. The death toll of these brutal experiments is unknown, but many as 200,000 people may have died, estimates historian Sheldon H. Harris, according to a 1995 New York Times report. Number 4. Robert Thompson and John Venables. On February 12, 1993, elementary school boys Robert Thompson and John Venables lured James Patrick Bulger away from the New Strand shopping center and Boodle after his mother had taken her eyes off him momentarily. The two boys had approached James, took him by the hand, and led him out of the shopping center. They then took James to the Leeds and Liverpool Canal, around a quarter-mile from the shopping center, where they dropped him on his head and he suffered injuries to his face. One of the boys threw blue paint that they had shoplifted earlier into James's left eye. They kicked him, stomped on him, and threw bricks and stones at him. They placed batteries in James's mouth, and finally the boys dropped a 22-pound railway fish plate on him. His mutilated body was found on the railway line 2 days after his abduction. He sustained 10 skull fractures as a result of the bar striking his head, and pathologist Alan Williams stated that he suffered so many injuries, 42 in total, that none could be identified as the fatal blow. Now, Robert and John were charged on February 20th, 1993 with abduction and homicide, and they were found guilty on November 24th, making them the youngest convicted slayers in modern British history. They were sentenced to an indefinite detention center at Her Majesty's pleasure and remained in custody until a parole board decision in June 2001 recommended their release on a lifelong license at 18. Number 3. Jim Jones. In the 1950s, Indiana native Jim Jones founded a church called the People's Temple that he claimed to promote socialism and equality with religious elements of Christianity. Initially, he was a little more than a charismatic hustler, but as the years progressed, he demanded more and more of his followers. In the early 1970s, Jones moved his group to California and set them in a commune-like settlement in Redwood Valley. Jones eventually came to believe that a nuclear war was imminent and moved his followers again to the South American country of Guyana, which he thought would be outside the potential danger zone. The group lived there for several years as the People's Temple Agricultural Project, but after former members started speaking out against the church, San Francisco Congressman Leo Ryan decided to travel to Jonestown to investigate claims of mistreatment. Temple security guards opened fire on Leo's group, and back at the settlement, Jones ordered his followers to drink a cyanide-laced beverage, and this is where the phrase "drinking the Kool-Aid" originates. A total of 918 people died in the incident, and until 2001, it was the largest loss of American civilian life in history. Number 2. Nero. Nero was a deranged Roman emperor and the final emperor of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, reigning from AD 54 until his death in AD 68. It's hard to be worse than having your own mother executed and poisoning your stepbrother, right? Well, what about burning prisoners in your garden at night as a source of light? Yeah, well, that's him. Now, Nero married Poppaea Sabina, but she mysteriously perished before having their second child. Now, historians of the time claim that Nero actually kicked Poppaea to death, and after her death, Nero fell in love with a man named Sporus, whose most striking feature was the resemblance to Nero's late wife. Nero then had the boy castrated and brought back to his palace, where he took calling him Lady and Queen. Now, ultimately, Nero's lifestyle caught up to him, and in 68 AD, after a turbulent 13-year reign, the Roman Senate ran out of patience and declared Nero a public enemy. Nero then fled, and on June 9, 68 AD, at the age of 30, he ended his own life. And coming in at number 1 is Ed Gein. Ed Gein was a serial slayer and grave robber. He created costumes, furniture, and other keepsakes from the bodies of his victims. While he was only officially convicted of taking the lives of 2 people, Bernice Worden and Mary Hogan, a police raid on his house turned up masks literally made from humans' faces, a belt of nipples, and a corset created from a skinned torso. Now, to be clear, he never wore these costumes when ending people's lives. Instead, he donned them in the privacy of his own home. Now, some masks appeared mummified, almost dried out, while others were more carefully preserved. A few had lipstick applied and looked more lifelike, and 4 had been stuffed with paper and hung on the wall of his bedroom, almost like hunting trophies. Ed was initially found unfit to stand trial and confined to a mental health facility, but by 1968 he was judged competent to stand trial. He was found guilty of the deaths, but he was found legally insane and was remanded to a psychiatric institution. Well, that's all for our list of the top 10 real evil people scarier than the Nun. Which person on our list do you think is the most evil? Let us know in the comments down below, and hey, why not like and subscribe while you're down there. I'm your host Emily, and we'll see you next time. Peace.